I'm grateful to you for joining us again as we continue this beginning of a journey talking to people whom we would regard as movers and shakers in this strange transitional situation the Irish Church is in. I'm here in the beautiful city of Limerick. I'm in the old Jesuit house on the Crescent with its magnificent adjoining church, both of which have been rescued from near ruin by a remarkable new order, the Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest, which came some years ago to Limerick and have taken over this huge challenge and are making the Mass in the extraordinary form available in modern Ireland. I'm joined by Canon Wulfran Lebocq. Canon Lebocq is the superior here in the house. He's the head man, the boss, il capo, and he's the man to whom one talks. Canon Lebocq, a pleasure, and thank you for giving us the time.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to have you and to take this time together here.
I can tell from speaking to you, Canon, that your beginnings were probably not in the city of Limerick.
Not exactly. Not exactly. As my accent can explain, I was not born in Limerick. I was not born in Ireland. I was born in France, 1974. Anyway, and a
mere child.
Yes, I used to be. Sometimes when I walk here in the street of Limerick, people say, oh, "What a young priest! It's so good to see such a young priest." So I feel very encouraging.
Indeed.
Yeah, yes. I'm not that old. It's fine. It's fine.
Good.
So
where in France?
I was born actually next to Paris, and my family is originally from Burgundy.
Oh, indeed.
Then, let us say, being French, I have spent. You might find that it's a bit strange, but I spent very, very little time in France with my family. When I was younger, we spent time in North Africa, in Algeria.
Wow.
Then we came back to France. We then spent a few years in South America, in French Guiana. Yes. So I came back to France when I was around 12 years old.
Yes.
And I really lived and remember France well when I was like 12 to 21,
yes.
Before I joined the seminary of the Institute of Christ the King, yes. And in Italy.
Yes.
So I spent more or less 10 years in France.
Yes. And
during this time I was in the boarding school in West France as well.
Yes.
So being French, I would say my heart has been in different parts of the world.
You were in a boarding school run by a religious order?
Yes, it was a diocesan school in La Sarthe in West France, near the city of Le Mans.
Okay.
Next to it. Very nice
area. Understand. And can you tell us something a little more about your family and the beginnings of your faith as belonging to you?
So the beginning of my faith, thank God, I was baptized on the feast of the Immaculate Conception. That has always been feels very dear to me,
yes, yeah.
Dear to our family as well.
Yes.
And I start with that because I think it was certainly one of the signs that then led me to our community, which is also dedicated, consecrated to the Immaculate Conception. So I was born in a Catholic family, with catechism and going to Mass every Sunday, of course, and I was very, very grateful for that.
What were your early career aspirations?
That's very interesting. When I was a child, actually, I never had any precise plan.
Yes.
Like all child, I would say I wanted to be a vet. I was full of energy.
Sure.
I was always happy to work, to help people. When I was a child, I always had this, I don't want to be too proud, but this great spirit of sacrifice, to give myself, to do something for others, and I was feeling that there was something higher that I had to do and I wanted to do, and I just wanted to cooperate. So this was always my mind. Then as precise career, it wasn't clear. It became clearer when I was a teenager.
Yes.
So as a teenager, I then discovered the traditional Latin Mass, and this is how I realized what I was receiving as a child, as a young teenager, was giving me very little spiritual food and not what I was expecting. And I discovered in the Latin Mass this very deep meaning, all these signification.
Feast.
All, yeah, that were very, very important for me, and really were really feeding my spiritual life. And I think it's how throughout these few years my vocation was discerned and became much clearer.
Well, the church is earthy enough about these things. She's quite practical to the extent that that real call to serve that you discerned, that doesn't mean that you have to become a priest, but it is, the church would say, well, that's interesting.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And as a teenager, I was really feeling that more and more precisely in my heart, in my soul. You see, God really speaks to us, shows us some signs. He discerns he makes us discern His will with a lot of different events. Mm-hmm. And it's more or less like in the Holy Scripture, when God was present in the midst of His people with the column of fire. And sometimes, let us say, it was impossible to ignore the presence of God. This sign was definitely God's sign, God's presence. There's a very clear sign, but most of the time there were like all these little reminders of the presence of God, of His divine will, of my possible vocation. Mm-hmm. So I think as priests we always have these two different aspects. Sometimes people are really asking us, when did you know that you were called to the priesthood? Yes. Were you like St. Paul, on like falling from his horse and seeing the Lord and say, oh yes, Jesus, here I am? There is certain parts of that, nevertheless, and the big signs of vocation. With sometimes we could really feel in our soul how we are attracted by prayer life, how we are ready to take celibacy, to consecrate our life, to give our life to God, to say one yes with no return. You know, all these acts of generosity, humility as well, that are very, very present. And
I hate to press a man on this, but at the same time you'll understand that some young men listening to this, and indeed young women who may be considering the religious life, will be really interested in a bit more. I'm sorry.
I hope so, I would say.
Sure,
Yes.
sure. Would you say your possible attraction to the priesthood deepened your spiritual life, or that a deepening in your spiritual life led to the attraction to the priesthood, insofar as a man can ever separate these things out?
Yes. We live in a former Jesuit house, so if I had to give a Jesuit answer, I would say there's a little bit of both.
Yes, yes.
Of course, when we pray, when we take more care of our spiritual life, we discern more God's will, and we do want that. Yes. And then the contrary effect works as well. Yes. There's always this kind of interactivity.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you had thought perhaps you'd be a vet, or that you had sort of looked at that. You enjoyed the countryside.
Yeah, very much, very much. We come from a family in Burgundy. Yes. Actually, our family house is in an older farm.
Yes.
And I do like the countryside very much. When I was a child, a teenager, I used to spend most of my vacation not on the beach, not with new fashions, not with nightclubs, nothing, but just walking with my friends, walking with my cousins on the farm, helping. And I was seeing that, and I understand that even better now, how it was a great gift, something that I was very happy to do that. And indeed, I have a great love for the countryside.
Because unless I'm wrong, I think there's a definite strain in French Catholic spirituality that has a great love of nature and of the farming life and of village life. But perhaps I'm romanticizing that, or I'm wrong.
No, not at all. I think that's really true.
So you were hearing, as somebody said, you're hearing rumors of angels.
Yes.
You're starting to think of, what crystallized this? What made the priesthood just stand in front of you? It
was, let's say, gradual, in a sense that the vocation was discerned step by step. If I had to say, like, some of the clear path, like important moment of my life to discern my vocation, I remember very well once when I was visiting a monastery. It was the monastery in Fongobo in France, in West France, Benedictine order.
Famous.
You see, when people would go there, they would be very impressed by nature, by the solemn liturgy, by the solemn mass. And actually, I like, of course, that very much. We'll speak about that, I'm sure. But what really touched my heart very, very much, it was very impressive, it's in the morning, all the priests were celebrating their private masses at the side altars. I remember this sentence, these few words came to me, this is the church. This is how the church prays. It's not our personal prayer, yes, but the priest who really celebrate his daily mass, yes, and how the bride prays to the groom.
I remember being once in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, where all the different branches of the Catholic family were there, and there were different languages, and it was really chaotic. You know, one of them you would almost suspect, trying to shout louder than the next. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. You could hear the whole church was, in its own way, praising God, and I can well imagine how you had that experience with the side altars and the thing. A tremendous sense of the church's ongoing conversation with God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And something that became clearer and clearer throughout my years as a teenager was really everything was attracting me to the priesthood. More and more things. No attraction for like the joys of the world, if you want, like all these new fashions, like clothes, new things.
You weren't into money?
No, I mean I needed money to spend my things. But the good thing is, we are speaking about work. I was learning the value of money. Yes. Money doesn't come by itself, doesn't grow. Contrary to what we could
learning here every day.
Yeah, yes. And I'm very grateful because as a child, as a young teenager, I learned the value of money, what work is, then the necessity to always spend things when we have to, but with a good preparation, with parsimony.
That's interesting. I think people often forget how grounded the spiritual life is.
Yeah.
And I mean, Teresa of Avila was famously practical, down to earth, and that without being a captive of money, at the same time you respect money, which can do things. It makes things happen.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes things possible. Why the Institute? And can you tell us a little bit about it? I know very little. I do know that you have a great love of St. Francis de Sales. There are at least 2 statues of him here.
Yes.
I know it was founded by Father Vache, Monsignor Vache.
Yes.
I really don't know much more.
That's a good start.
Good. It's quite new. It's a young order.
Yes, we are very a young order. We celebrated last year the 30th anniversary of our community.
Wow.
The Institute of Christ the King was founded indeed by Monsignor Gilles Vache, who was a French priest, along with Father Philippe Morat.
Yes.
So they were 2 friends, and they studied in the 1970s in the Archdiocese of Genoa with Cardinal Siri.
Wow!
They were
the famous cardinal.
The famous, yes, great
man.
And they were then ordained a priest by Pope Jean Paul in 1979 on the feast of St. John the Baptist. And then they both stayed in Rome a few years as priests, as students. And then throughout these years in Rome, they had, of course, a great love for the church, for Romanity, a great love for the traditional mass, that they were, at this time, things were not very easy. And they were also approached by more and more students, young priests, and it was kind of certainly time-consuming. And after a certain time, Monsignor Vache was asked by some cardinals, mainly Cardinal Oddi, Cardinal Stickler, they told him, you have a charism, you have to take care of these young priests, of these possible young vocation who are coming to you, and you have a fatherly heart, you must do something. And Monsignor Vache said, I have not come to Rome to create or to found an order, but then again, signs were coming and possibilities, different things were made possible. And in the same time, Monsignor Vache did not really want to resist. So he said, we will try. We'll try and open a seminary, open a young community. And then this was the beginning of, please God, a long story indeed.
Yes.
So this is kind of the very early years of the foundation of the Institute. So we opened our seminary in 1990 in the Archdiocese of Florence. In Quiciliano. where we were invited by, at the time, Cardinal Silviano Piovanelli. And
it looks absolutely beautiful, but I don't. Apparently, it wasn't in great shape when they got it.
You're entirely right. Yes,
yeah.
yes. I wasn't there at the very, very beginning, but I joined just during after the first years, and even when I was a young seminarian, we were spending a lot of time to empty the buckets because it was raining, and washing the floor because the things were wrong, and looking for the electricity and the electric fuses, and we had to deal with a lot of things. I remember even as a first-year seminarian, we had no heating in the whole building.
Oh my goodness!
And there was even a hole in the wall. And I think in life we only remember the good things.
Yes.
We forget these things,
and
I'm grateful
you were all
for
young.
that. Yes, we were indeed.
Yeah.
So these were how the institute was then founded.
Yes,
and it was founded to respond to a certain request for more and more vocations who really wanted to be faithful to Rome, faithful to the Holy Father, under the obedience of his obedience, under the obedience of the bishops. And then, in the same time, only celebrate the Latin Mass. So this can be done in many other communities. So why the Institute? My understanding would be it's like in the church you have lots of different orders: Franciscans, Benedictines, Dominicans, with all different charisms.
Yes.
And in our community, Monsignor Weich had a great love for Saint Francis de Sales, and with his fatherly heart and very well balanced spirit, I would say, he gave to this community this spirit of family, the spirit in which the seminarians could then receive priestly formation according to the spirit of the Church, being faithful to the Holy Father, and celebrate the Latin Mass, and have their priestly life really rooted in the divine liturgy.
I am right in calling you an order. Am I?
Yeah, we are actually a society of apostolic life.
There we go.
So we were erected as a society of apostolic life in 1990.
Yes.
And then in 2008 we were raised as a pontifical rite.
Yes.
So in canonical form. That means since 2008, all the priests of our community, as soon as we are ordained priests, we are canons.
Yes.
By canons, sometimes people might be impressed and say, "Oh, you are a canon.
Yes.
You must be very good."
Yes.
Or you must be, I don't know what.
Yeah.
Actually, a canon is not really honorific title. For us, it reminds us our duty.
Yes.
And there's absolutely almost no difference between
before
and after the pontifical rite on this canonical form on these aspects. The life that we were living before was really a life rooted in the divine liturgy and with the importance of the divine office sung together. And this is what became even more a more important duty as priest.
Would you say you're canons regular?
We are not canon regulars because we do not pronounce any vows. We are not religious.
That's very important distinction.
We are not diocesan, we are not religious, we are this little part in between called the Society of Apostolic Life, but erected in a canonical form. So that's why we have this, it's not an option for us to live together or to sing the divine office or not to sing, it's a duty. That's why at the seminary the liturgy is first, it's very the most important, the Opus Dei, the most important part of our life. And even in all our apostolates throughout the world, wherever we are, we have to live in smaller communities and a good number of times, 3-4 times a day, sing the divine office together. This is what makes the canon, really.
Yes. Do you follow a rule of life? Is there a set down rule, a written rule?
Yes, we do.
And is it Augustinian in its origin or Benedictine or?
So it's, let us say, according to the life that we had at the seminary, so more or less in the spirit of Saint Benedict.
Yes.
And with Saint Francis de Sales as well.
I understand.
So in other words, we have a daily schedule in all the apostolates, which with certain things that will never move.
Yes.
For instance, they can never be cancelled, but other things that can be a bit flexible as well.
Can you answer this? Why the extraordinary form? Why don't you just get a guitar and hang loose, chill out? Why the extraordinary form, which is notoriously difficult? It's precise, it's strict. A high mass is not an easy thing to do well. It was often done badly, I suspect, but to do well. What attracted you to this? You said, all right, you found this feast in it of theology and of symbolism, but the whole order seemed very much committed to it.
So we have this spirit of Saint Benedict is one of our patron saints, and with him we learn. He teaches us on how to be priest, to be men of God, men of prayer, men of sacrifice as well. So that for us, really, the liturgy is our first apostolate, and we do our best to give God the most beautiful liturgy, the most elaborate, the most precise as well. I would not say that it's very difficult.
Maybe not to you.
No, I would see the traditional Latin Mass as really something that we have received as priest, as an instrument of God, and that we celebrate. So I would not see something like something that we own, something that we can change, that we can use, but something that we receive, and in which we become instruments, and by which God then dispenses all His graces. So why exactly? Just in a few words, I would really say it's this spirit of giving to God what we think that expresses the most perfectly our belief. See, this is the lex orandi, lex credendi.
What you say makes perfect sense to me, but I can't help feeling that in it is a gentle, a very gentle, very loyal, very loving, but nonetheless present judgment on the Novus Ordo. Can you say anything to me about that?
Yes, something important in the traditional Latin Mass compared to the Novus Ordo. Indeed, the Novus Ordo would be often focused on something like the Mass is a kind of a gathering. We are led by a prayer leader, and we are all together. There is this spirit of community which is very present. And by the way, this spirit of community is also expressed by facing one another. The traditional Mass never neglect, of course, that there is a commemoration of the Last Supper, but really makes the sacrificial aspect very present, and the sacrifice of the Mass. So he reminds us that every Eucharist, every Mass is both a sacrament and a sacrifice. And it expresses very well the four ends of each sacrifice, as we can see in the Old Testament, you know, when the priests were offering some sacrifices just in adoration or in thanksgiving, for atonement and petition.
Arising from that, the central work of the order is the sacred liturgy, but arising from that, what happens in terms of outreach then to the community? Do you run parishes?
The Institute is kind of... we have lots of different apostolates in our community. When we joined the seminary, when we ordained a priest, we could be priest in, let us say, a parish church, or it's not often called a parish church, but we could serve in a city, in a large church, and we would have more or less exactly the same responsibilities and duties as a parish priest. So this involves pastoral ministry, daily mass, confessions, adoration, sick calls, visit of the sick, funerals, like really spiritual direction, really like in a parish, altar boy training, all the side events, if you want, with the altar boy, choir, everything that we could see in any church. We also have some missions, beautiful missions in Africa, in Gabon.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, in the Archdiocese of Libreville. We have been very involved in the Diocese of Mouila, in the south, in Gabon. And then the third, we also have a great apostolate, a presence in schools, in running schools. So this is especially true in France, in Belgium, in Italy a little bit, and in the States more or less. So according to the countries and the tradition, it could be either homeschool, like in England as well, in Preston, or really running a school, or just being chaplain. So this is an important part of our vocation as well. So when we join the seminary and when we ordain the priest, it's really like on the day of our ordination, we have said, ad sum, here I am, O Lord, and then our superiors appoint us to these different apostolates. They appoint us, I would say, I like that very much, because it's both authoritarian, it's an appointment, but it's also very fatherly.
Yes.
Our superior will never appoint someone somewhere where he knows that this person doesn't want to go.
Yes.
You know, it's an aspect of Saint Francis de Sales as well.
Yes.
Always this great balance, this great love for vocation, love for God.
Yes. In the modern scene at the moment, particularly in Ireland, what do you think the extraordinary form of the Mass, regularly celebrated, has to offer? I mean, obviously we both agree that the Mass is central to the Church's life, but what do you think the extraordinary form has to offer in a society which, well, I don't want to be too dramatic, but it's pretty much apostatizing, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty much, it's chucking over religion and becoming very secular. Now, you'd have seen this in France. You'd have seen a much older secular society in France, but it took a while to happen here, but as you can see, it has happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is indeed this kind of delay between what happened in France in the 1970s, 80s, and what's going on nowadays now. So I think it's very important. See, the traditional Latin Mass, all the reverence, the sacredness, the precision, all these rites are very important. They are made, of course, first of all to God, to praise God in adoration, but they also touch us. They also help us to pray more and to grow in holiness. So I think that's really it's a very important apostolate. Sometimes people ask us, how do you kind of convert people? Is it by your sermons, by wearing the cassock, by giving the good example? And these things are true, of course. We do not neglect any of these aspects. But the liturgy is the most pedagogical way that God uses to teach us. And by offering here in the city center of Limerick and in the other dioceses in Ireland where we have been invited and where we serve, I see that as a great act of charity, a great proof that the priests are available for people as well. People are attracted, people are edified, not because we are genius, but because we try to be good instruments and cooperate with what the Church wants, and in this liturgy.
You see the actual mode of celebration of the liturgy as being especially important. Is that the liturgy is celebrated in a fitting manner, in the most beautiful manner possible. Do you have a favorite musical piece?
Yes, I do have. I like music very much.
Mm-hmm.
I play the organ. I studied the organ when I was a bit younger.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not a great organist, but I like the organ very much, let us say. And I learned Gregorian chants when I was in my parish church before joining the seminary, yes. And actually have more training and experience in chant. Yes. My favorite piece in chant would be, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ave Maria on the fourth Sunday of Advent.
Yes.
Which is a very, very nice piece, very impressive, long one, not super difficult, but of course, these are the words of the Gospel, yes. And the melody just magnificent, showing all these different aspects of strength, of faith, of sweetness as well.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that I like very, very much.
Yes. What's your feeling on the present condition of the Catholic Church worldwide?
So I think it's important to see the current crisis in the world not as only something economic, not something with the education, not only material, but also something very spiritual, something, yes. It's definitely a crisis of faith, yes. Which is very, very important. And that would also remind us of other crises in the world, in history. I'm just thinking about, of course, what we are currently experiencing is big, it's terrible, it's sad, there are many bad aspects. But we also have to remember that other crises were even worse. if we just think about the crisis during the 11th century under the pontificate of Gregory the Seventh. Yeah. Even at the time of the Reform, things were very, very, very difficult. So I think it's always important to have this context when we have to judge the current world. For me, it's always important to remember that we must have faith in all things, regardless what happens. Things are allowed by God, and we have to face every single event in the spirit of faith. And whatever happens, we must always remember as priests and as Christians that the Church is divine. And if there is a crisis, if there are some sad things, if there are some big difficulties, that means the Church is always this ship in the middle of the sea. It struggles a lot. So we are in the middle of a storm. And when we are in the middle of this storm, some people might think that to save themselves, to survive, they'd better jump out of the ship and try to find a raft or something. This is temptation because we would go out of what God has instituted, out of the Church. So regardless what happens, I think it's important to always remember that the Church is divine and that the gates of hell will not prevail, shall not prevail. When we are in the middle of the storm, it means it's not the time to, let us say, put more and more sails and take some possible dangers or do difficult things. Sometimes it's more the time to reduce the sails, or it might even be the time to go sometimes like a little submarine, just under the water and on the gentle way. It means with no compromise, but just being wise, being prudent. We may also think that it's a time that maybe blood has to be shed, and we may, of course, remember the word of Tertullian, sanguis martyrum semen Christianorum, which might be as well. It's important to have that in mind. The blood of the martyr is the seed for Christians.
Why did the Institute come to Ireland? The answer may not be flattering, but nevertheless. And why specifically to Limerick?
Everything is prepared by God. Everything is under His divine will. And with the time now, I would say we understand much better what was happening at the beginning of our community. So I told you that Monsignor Vac and Canon Mora at the time, as young priests, when they were studying in Rome in the 1980s, it happened that it was easier for them to stay at the Irish College. So as young priests, Ireland has been very, very dear to them. They had good friends, good confreres among the priests. By the way, then some of them became bishops, even cardinals. So there was this very important link and relationship from their young years as a priest and with Ireland. Then, after a good number of years, in 2006, 2005, Monsignor Schmitz, who's the Vicar General of our community, had come here to Ireland to celebrate different masses. At the time, I was a priest at the seminary in Italy, because I stayed 7 years after my ordination at the seminary, because I had already come once quickly to Ireland. I said to my superior that I could speak English. It wasn't a lie, it was just a mistake on my behalf. Yeah. My superior, then not being able to send a priest here for good, asked me if I could come once a month. So I started to come once a month from 2006 to 2009 and to celebrate a monthly mass here in Limerick. And then in the meantime, we had more and more contact. I was also starting to say mass in Galway. And then it became twice a month. And in 2010, my superior told me, things are going well, everybody is happy with you in Ireland, and I think you'd better then stay there and keep establishing the apostolate and respond to the invitation of the bishop in the different dioceses, which I did. So since 2010, we have been really permanently resident in the Diocese of Limerick. And something happened. As soon as I started to come in 2006, it was the farewell mass in the Jesuit church. We are here on O'Connell Street, which is the main street in Limerick, and the Jesuit church is, let us say, the biggest church of the city center, and I don't want to be too proud, but certainly the nicest. The Jesuit order sold this church in 2006 to a Galway developer that wanted to turn it into a spa and a leisure center.
Intriguing. Oh.
Intriguing, and actually it was very scandalous for a lot of people. Hundreds of people told me, I say hundreds, I don't exaggerate, people told me, you know, we have been supporting this church, our parents, grandparents have made some sacrifices to build this church, to maintain the church, and now it's sold, has been closed, and God knows what's going to happen. So there were a lot of prayers being raised to reopen this church, a lot of sacrifices, and through work, prayer, but also a big mortgage, we could then in 2012 make an offer, purchase the church, and with the permission of the local authority, then reopen the church for divine worship. So when we moved here in 2012, the church had been empty, vacant during 6 years. There was, of course, big lack of maintenance. Remember when a lot of windows were broken, there were pigeons living inside, there was no heating, it was raining in a lot of parts of the house, on the top floor.
The roof was leaking.
The roof was leaking. The church was leaking as well. There were many water leaks. Shrubs were growing inside the confessionals, and the whole church was really empty. So you could just imagine, in this country with no heating, with the amount of dampness, dust, dirt, and everything.
Yes, a building would deteriorate quickly.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. The present cultural political situation in Ireland, the kind of socio-cultural matrix that you have to deal with, that you have to work in and build a parish in, build an apostolate in a community in. What's your take on that as a French priest?
You see, in France, we have we're very close to Ireland. We like Ireland. I think between French people and Irish people, there was always something in common.
Yes.
Mostly two Catholic countries, and also, I don't want to be too polemical, but common enemies as well.
Yes.
So
you mean our beloved neighbours?
I don't know. There are many neighbours now.
Yes. France would loom hugely in the Irish imagination. Back in the 17th, 18th centuries, the poetry, the songs talk about the French, because there was always constant hope of a French fleet, which almost happened a few times. So for us as French, we would really see Ireland as a model of almost a model of a Catholicism, when we see that the name of the Holy Trinity is written in the Constitution. We know that Ireland suffered so much throughout this century with the persecution, with the Great Famine, and nevertheless, people kept the faith with less or little or no sacraments during a long time. And we would always see Irish people as real fighters. This is the image that we would have in France. And nowadays, of course, the reality is very different. Yes.
It seems that there's definitely, I don't want to say a lack of energy, but something, not something a bit similar. We are often told that French people, we have in our heart all these consequences of French Revolution, to protest, to be against, not to be obedient enough, not to be docile enough. And unfortunately, this is certainly true. But sometimes, it seems that nowadays, this is really something that we have to consider as well, and we must really discern, according to the political situation now, we have to stand up, and we have to resist, and we have to protest, and there are definitely some things that we should not accept.
Yes.
And I think that it's a part of our vocation as well to really be here.
And to help Ireland rediscover its Catholic roots.
Yes,
because Recently we interviewed John Waters, and he was making the point that Catholicism really is in the bones of the Irish. That's 1,500 years. It's very difficult to undo that in the space of a few decades.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But I would say thank God, because the Catholicism is still very present in the faith, in people. That
now this is interesting. You see that.
Yes, we see that. We see that, we experience that, and even if we are told, I would say the contrary, even if the media keep repeating and repeating again that the church is dying, that there's no practice, faith is present. And we do see people with no ashes, I would say, but really embers. So when a priest is faithful to his vocation, when a priest is available for the sacrament, people come to him. A lot of people are still really open to receive the sacrament and to cooperate with God's grace, which is not as easy in other countries.
Yes.
But you see, the media, as you know, they repeat things, and they repeat and repeat again. And people are sometimes very naive, and they would drink everything that they would hear on the TV, on the news, on their mobile phone, on the web. And this makes also people very sometimes disappointed and very weak and hopeless.
Yes.
So this is really something that, as priest, the spirit of faith, the spirit of the fact that the church is divine, is always very comforting, very encouraging, and gives us this strength.
There's a sculpture of a ship in the Piazza Spagna in Rome.
Yes.
You remember it? It's very clever. I think it's perhaps by Bernini. The ship is effectively the bowl of the fountain, and it's taking in water and half sinking, which is the church.
Yes.
It's an image apparently for the church.
Yes.
Constantly sinking, but never sinks.
Yes. Some people would tell you as well that there is another image of the ship, and here is that, you know, when there's a leader, they would all follow the same leader. And what we could also see is that if the leader takes a bad direction, he could put everybody in danger.
Yes.
And if the leader jumps off the cliffs, and this is something that we also have to pray for and to fight against.
But what's our way forward, Can? If all else fails, your society can recall you, and you can find somewhere that would work better, where your efforts would yield a better result. But this is all we have. It's our country, this is our church. Do you see a way forward for us? What advice would you give us?
The advice that I would give us is the gospel. The gospel, I would say, come and see, like in St. John, see the good things that happen, and not be disappointed, not be broken if you hear things. Try to see the good thing in the good part, the good aspect in everything. And there are a lot of good things. When I see the number of young families who come to the sacraments, the number of children who come to catechism, the number of vocations who discern, who are attracted to the religious life, this, we should not neglect that at all. Of course, even if there seem to be few, but these are really important smiles, important proofs of the divinity of the Church, of the presence of God, and this is very encouraging. So I think it's important not to neglect all these good aspects.
Canon, coming as you do from such a rich, growing tradition within your society of devotion to the liturgy, what's your impression of our general liturgical culture here in Ireland?
It's very interesting because in Italy there is this very deep Roman spirituality, the spirit of Romanity, which is very present in the liturgy. And what was done by Charlemagne, by all and throughout the centuries of the Church was to expand this spirit of Romanity throughout the Church. Yes. And actually, even before Charlemagne, if we speak about the Roman Empire, really wherever it was extended, wherever the soldiers were conquering the different areas, it also, in a certain sense, facilitates this Roman spirit
Yes.
of the liturgy. Here in Ireland, it's obvious that there is certainly less, if not Roman spirit.
That's very interesting. So obviously you would see in Novus Ordo masses, let's say in Italy, you would still see that Romanitas. You still see it there.
Oh yes, this would be very important. It would be very important in the
but less here
in Italy. And here in Ireland, this Roman spirit is definitely less present. We might think that it's just a part of a consequence of the fact that the Roman soldiers, the Roman Empire, never came here, was never established. Some soldiers, just launched some investigation here in Ireland, and they called that Hibernia, because it was just cold and they went away quickly.
Yes, there's no evidence of even an encampment, which is remarkable. Nothing. Yeah, some coins, I think. That's about it.
But on this liturgical aspect, something that could really explain that we often experience is that the liturgy, as we celebrate it with this both this Roman spirit and this grandeur, with the liturgy, the chants, the organ, the incense, all these ceremonies, probably never existed even before the liturgical reforms and throughout these centuries in Ireland. With the persecutions, people had no churches. They had to celebrate or attend Mass in...
Mostly it would have been low Mass.
Yeah, low Masses, short Masses. And I think there's still this kind of love and for low Mass, for short ceremonies.
Yes.
And it was interesting when we first celebrated the public Masses here and sung Masses. Elderly people sometimes told me, I remember when I was a child, but there was always the Latin Mass, but it was just a low Mass.
Yes.
And you are celebrating something new.
Yes.
So we were celebrating the traditional Latin Mass with all the ceremonies, but for local people it was something new that never existed.
Yes. I think High Mass in any case was, it was more expensive. And for funerals, for example, or weddings, it was beyond the reach of most people because you had to pay 3 priests.
Yes.
You had to give them a stipend, so the money went up, being practical about it. But that's a very interesting observation, that we have a lower, as the Anglicans would say, a lower liturgical taste.
But another part would be, it's interesting to see how the fruit of the liturgy, how people are touched regardless the other generations, how people appreciate, how, when we speak about the liturgy, when we explain the rites, the spiritual meaning, the historical meaning, the practical meaning, it's really how the Church teaches us through the liturgy.
Can we move from that to the whole area? It's very much the apostolate, but I would regard it as a part of the core of the apostolate, is youth ministry, is ministry to the youth, the apostolate to the youth. The youth ministry is very well developed in France, perhaps better than here?
I would say certainly better than here, yes.
Better than here, yeah.
In France, in more or less all churches, especially churches with Latin Mass, which I know of course better. First of all, the average age is very young, young families. So there's a lot of catechism, a lot of youth movements, mostly the Boy Scouts. Yes. And this works very well. But not only the Boy Scouts, but groups who would take children or teenagers, including young adults, for summer camps, for retreats, for walks, for visits. There are a lot of things like that in France. The biggest one would certainly be the Boy Scouts. And actually, it's, how Boy Scouts are very good with deepening and this sense of responsibility, helping people to find the skills. We often see that as even an introduction or discover of community life, and that's very, very important, very present in France, indeed.
Yes. Last year, the Scout Europe visited Westport in County Mayo, and when they realised that I was parish priest of Athenry, they were delighted because one of their campfire songs is The Fields of Athenry.
Oh.
So they insisted on singing it for me, all the verses. I must say I was deeply impressed by them.
Yeah.
I thought it was a wonderful movement. For reasons we don't need to go into, our scouting situation here is pretty dismal, really, and that the scouting movements are really pretty much secular. And I think there is a real sense among Catholics, particularly young Catholics, of the need for a scouting movement. And I hear a lot of talk of France. So that would confirm what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the young Catholics in Ireland are very aware of what you're saying.
In a lot of parts of the world, there is a little French origin.
Yes.
When something goes well, especially with the Boy Scouts, or even with the Latin Mass, wherever the Latin Mass is extended and it's growing, there is often a French origin as well, a little help. Not to see that as being proud, but I see that as a little reward that, let us say, we owe to Ireland. We owe.
That's very kind. Yeah.
I mean, in France, we have received some missionaries.
Yes.
We have received, like Saint Malachy, Saint Patrick.
Yes. Malachy died at Clairvaux, didn't he?
Yes.
I think,
and even in the Cathedral of Troyes in Champagne, his relics are along with Saint Bernard on the same reliquary.
Yes. I don't think Bernard rated us very highly. He had tremendous sympathy for his friend Malachy, who he said was operating in the middle of savage barbarians. Now, he may not have been far off. I said it was difficult. And of course, as you know, the Irish had an older system of monasticism that probably clashed to some extent with the Cistercians. But it's interesting that the Cistercians and later the Trappists, after the penal laws relaxed at the end of the 18th century, it was the Reforms, the Cistercians and the Trappists who were most successful in Ireland. And the theory I've heard a lot of people give is that the Irish related them to the asceticism of the early Irish monks. It triggered a kind of folk memory, or they admired the Cistercians. Less the Benedictines, whom they found worldly.
Yes.
Well, as worldly as themselves. Central to any resurgence of Catholicism here and the emergence of a new and undoubtedly smaller Irish church will be leadership, spiritual leadership. And the priest is central to that. I know you're very kind and very diplomatic, but what's your impression of us, the Irish priesthood?
First of all, I'm very grateful and very impressed because there is a great heart that we see
that's lovely.
In every Irish person has a great heart, great generosity, and sense of welcoming us very, very, very well. And that's something that I have often, if not always, experienced. Then, for priests, we often see, I personally think that unfortunately there's always this kind of being disappointed, this little spirit of defeat. So that the priests are kind of still running, still doing their duties, but what is the future for that?
I understand.
So this is something that we would that I would personally have noticed often enough.
A weariness, low morale.
A lot of priests would see that there are a good number of things that in the world, in the church, in their church, in the liturgy, in their parish, are not perfect, but should be changed. But you see, they would speak in conditional. We should do that. This maybe could be improved, but then to change it, it requires some effort, and things are so. Sometimes there's definitely a lack of strength, and to make good decisions sometimes could be something bit difficult or challenging.
I understand. I'm sure you'll agree that formation for the priesthood is absolutely crucial. In the Irish priesthood and the priesthood generally, how do you see the role of the seminary presently and going forward? The seminary as a model for training, which, as you know, it wasn't always the only way in which priests were trained.
No, of course. Especially before the Council of Trent,
yes.
Priests were trained with other priests, so they were discovering the pastoral ministry, studying, and then I think it's what was how the seminary was established after the Council of Trent really give us a template, certain model of the priestly life that we should then live in the future. So if in a seminary, a good seminary, the template, the model is a certain monastic life with a lot of silence, with a part of the life which is in silence, with everything rooted in the liturgy, where the formation is really given according to the spirit of the church, with a spiritual formation, intellectual formation, human formation. I think these three aspects really gives the whole training, the whole formation to these vocations that they will then keep throughout their life as priests.
Yeah.
So in our community, this is something that I liked very much and which is very clear as well. See, we have Saint Benedict as a patron saint who gives us this duty. You know, the most important thing for a priest is to be simply a priest, simply a man of God, a man of prayer, a man of sacrifice, a man who prays, a man who speaks about God, a man who is available for the sacraments, all these spiritual aspects. And the importance of prayer with the laus perinis, the fact that we have to pray and sing together. This is the Opus Dei.
Yes.
So Saint Benedict is very important. So we have Saint Thomas Aquinas as a patron saint for all our studies, to have a very Catholic dogma. You know how things can be in trouble nowadays. It's always important to have recourse to these great Dominican saints for the dogma, the philosophy, the theology, and even for further studies afterwards. And then Saint Francis de Sales really gives us this great balance on this human part of our formation as well. Then how do we live on a daily basis? This spirit of balance between the priest who is just, like God is just, but the priest must be merciful as God is merciful as well. This great balance between the truth and charity. As priests, we have to preach, to deliver the truth, but with no compromise. Nevertheless, we have to make sure that we always say things with charity, step by step, on how can people receive this truth, because otherwise the truth will not be received.
Yes.
So Saint Francis de Sales gives us this great balance, this beautiful spirituality, especially with one of his famous sentences would be that cook the truth in charity until it tastes sweet. So this is really how we mundicate, we ruminate, the ruminates, like in Holy Scripture, this spirituality.
We chew.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. For quite a long time in Ireland, there has been some discussion as to whether we shouldn't go back to some extent to the older model, where the seminarium was spending more time with the priests. And I understand that in some French dioceses that was done, partly in the seminary, partly in the parish. Mm-hmm. But you see the seminary as still offering a good model for training priests, a good laboratory, if you like.
Yes, I think the seminary, as it is running nowadays, with these three important parts of to train the priest, with this spiritual, intellectual formation, and then receiving the holy orders throughout the years, really prepares the heart for a future priest. Mm-hmm. And during the seminary, during these 7 years, at least 7 years, this is how we deliver the formation in our community. It doesn't mean that vocations are just staying in a little cocoon and have no contact with the world at all during 7 years. Yes. We also have the seminarians who have some interactions, some activities, some experience with summer camp, with catechism. During their vacation, they will be assigned every year to an apostolate to help in the church. Mm. So they would see on the long term how the priests live, what they do on a daily basis. And even for us as priests, when we receive some seminarians in our community, we also know them better, we also see them better, they have different responsibilities, and this is good both for them as their personal discernment for our community, and as well as for us as priests to see, do they have a vocation for our community? Are they really able to live as a future priest according to our spirituality? And then, so during the seminary, a seminarian could usually spend 1 year either in one of the churches of our community worldwide. It could be in our missions, it could be here in Ireland, it could be in the States.
At what point?
It depends.
Yes.
It really depends on the judgment of our superiors.
Yes.
It's usually between philosophy and theology.
Sure. It's a natural break.
Yes. It could also be also at the request of the seminarian himself,
Yes.
or at the judgment of the superior as well.
Yes. That he needs more time, more experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's your favorite saint?
My favorite saint, I think throughout our life we change. Maybe, I hope I will keep my favorite saint as Saint Francis de Sales, whom I have really discovered in our community, in the Institute of Christ the King. But then when I was younger, you see, when we were young and full of energy, I really had Saint Joan of Arc as a model.
Wow.
I could see in her the fighter. Something that I liked very, very much with her was nothing dearer than Christ. Nicil carius Christi. To give God first in all things. In French we say Dieu premier servi. These few words for me were just very impressive, very attractive, and this was my life. This is really how I wanted to be a priest. During my priestly formation,
yes,
as a seminarian, of course, I prayed a lot to Saint Jean-Marie Baptiste Vianney, the Curé of Ars.
Ah, yes.
Of course, as the model of all priests. So yes. I don't want to say that he became my favorite saint, yes, but he has become very, very dear to me. And now I would say, as a priest, I keep living, I keep exercising my priestly ministry with Saint Joan of Arc, Saint Jean-Marie Baptiste Vianney, and really under the patronage of Saint Francis de Sales, yeah, who has become now my favorite saint. It's true.
Yes. A friend of mine told me that although he has visited many shrines, the only place where he really felt the presence of the transcendent was in Ars.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it's just a sleepy little town to this day.
Yes.
That it's not even a town, it's a little village, I think.
Yeah, it's a little village in South Burgundy.
And he said apart from the church, really, there's not much there. But he said from the moment he got off the bus, it took him quite a while to get there. From the moment he got off the bus, he felt there was something there in the town itself, which I thought was quite remarkable. I think somebody in Ars was asked why the people seemed so good in the area, and they said we're no better than the others, but we have a saint as a parish priest, so we feel we have to live up to it.
Yes.
It was interesting that he had that effect on everybody.
Yeah. I think that's very encouraging as well for all of us as priests, that one saint can really change, yeah, not only a parish but a country, yeah, and have very happy, long consequences all over the world. Mm. So I think I would just see that as very, very encouraging, as, mm-hmm, something very optimistic as well.
Didn't Dom Chotard say something like that? If the priest is a saint, the people will be holy. If the priest is holy, the people will be good, and so on.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And then if the priest is just good, things won't go well. That the priest really has nowhere to go. He must go deeper into God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's interesting. Your favorite shrine?
So we were speaking about the Immaculate Conception.
Yes.
I told you that I was baptized on the 8th of
yes,
December, so I think you may have already found what could be my favorite shrine, being French. Of course, I have a great devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes. But again, as a priest, Our Lady of Fatima has already become my favorite shrine. We see that...
Fatima made a big impression on me. I went to it much later in life.
Yes.
Yeah, you were only a young man, but I went much later, only 2015, and I've been a few times since, and it blew me away.
And especially here in Ireland, where the devotion to the first Saturday is very, yes, very common, and people are very faithful. I've really found a very beautiful devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and I've deepened this devotion here, mm-hmm, really. And then Fatima itself is very powerful. It really shows that, especially for our troubled times, mm-hmm, that peace does not come from men, mm-hmm, and peace really comes through Our Lady. And she made some promises, and we will be, if we are faithful to Our Lady's promises, then peace will reign.
Yes. Have you visited Knock?
Yes, I've been to Knock, thank God, a few times. I must tell you a little story. When I first came to Ireland here with my superior, Monsignor Schmitz, we made a little pilgrimage, like a private pilgrimage to Knock, and he knew that I was about to be appointed here to Ireland for good. We prayed at the shrine. Then he told me, Canon, you will have to come here often, if not very often, because what you will be doing here will not please to the evil one. So in your priestly ministry, in your apostolate, you will need special protection from Our Lady. So always, actually, I never forgot that. And as often as possible, when I travel, I always try to make a little detour to pray to Our Lady of Knock, indeed. And then, of course, I have a devotion to the Holy Souls. So each time I go to Knock, yes. I often think we don't go on our own. We go with all the intentions that people give us. So I think it's always important.
And Archdeacon Kavanagh, the parish priest, had just finished, as you know, 100 masses for the Holy Souls.
Yes.
Just when the apparition happened.
Indeed.
Kavanagh himself is quite an interesting character. A few people have said to me lately that they really think his cause should be introduced. Yeah, he was very, very holy, very saintly parish priest. A favourite theologian?
I like very much Fulton Sheen. You might be surprised.
Oh, wow. Yes.
But I always see in him someone modern,
yes,
who in 1920s and 1930s used the first media for good things, to proclaim the truth. Very good knowledgeable, and someone funny as well.
Yes, not only very bright himself, but a master teacher.
Yes.
He's a great teacher.
Yes.
He's clear. And his English, I would say, is easy to follow, I would imagine.
Something that I like very much with him is that even when he explains things, I often use these examples when I teach catechism, with all these very basic examples and drawings, because the memory remembers more images than numbers or quotations. And that's a very important aspect of his pedagogy as well.
I believe he spent hours preparing each session, hours and hours, and very often in front of the Blessed Sacrament. He would have his papers in front of him, and he would sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament and would do his preparation. A remarkable man, I completely agree with you. What would you say your favourite part of the Gospel is?
The favourite part would be, I like very much Martha and Mary.
Yes.
Because as a priest, as you know, we are often invited to do something and to prepare something and to be involved in something. And of course, in the Gospel, we see that the number of things that we have to do for God, for the liturgy, but sometimes there's also a risk of activism and waste of time. And we should never forget the importance of pray and sit down at the foot of our Lord and bowed towards the invisible God instead of only preparing material things. So I would say it's a very important part for me. Then really my favorite part is I think the woman at the well, in which we see of course the immensity of God's mercy, God's goodness, His readiness to give His pardon, His forgiveness to any soul, regardless the sins that he or she has committed, as soon as we accept, as soon as there is the contrition. And something that we often think, that I often experience, is that before Jesus give her the pardon for her sins, he asks her something. He asks her, give me a drink. And then she has, first of all, to receives the God's forgiveness. She also has to give something to God. And I see that very often in my priestly life. Let us say, if we are at the confessional, if souls are coming, we have to give time to God. We have to, so-called, waste some time for God. If nowadays the church is, Sacred Heart Church is much nicer, things are more dignified, is because we took some time we gave something to God with a long time, with no heating, with all these difficulties. So the woman at the well really reminds us how each priest, we have to give something to God, and then he grants us his favors.
Just imagine as we finish that you're a newly ordained Irish priest. Your parish priest has said to you, I'm delighted to have you, you're young, you're energetic, we have so many problems in our enormous parish, you just start the way you think best.
I would say, I hope it's not too personal, but one of the things that I would certainly do is really remember every day my priestly ordination. It seems to be very basic, very easy, but you see during the ordination, when the archdeacon calls all the candidates to the priesthood, he calls them by their name, and we respond, ad sum, here I am, O Lord. And the first thing I would do when I open my eyes in the morning, when I open the church, each time renew this yes to God. Here I am, ecce venio, here I am to serve you. I think this is something very important that I would always renew, and that this yes that we say to God is really the imitation of the holy angels. When the holy angels make a decision, it's yes or no. But if it's yes, we do not change our mind. We serve God perfectly and with no return, without going back. So I think that's very, very important. And during the lockdown, we saw that so many people were suffering here with the difficulties to receive the sacraments. So one of the things that I would really do if I was a newly ordained priest, and if I was assigned to a parish, was really tell the Lord and make the promise always to be available for the sacraments. Like people who come to confession, we know that priests, they don't always come at the right time. It's always annoying, could be disturbing. We have other things to do. Nevertheless, if we really, most of the time, we could hear confessions, and it's important. That's really a very important part of our vocation. Yes. And if we cannot, I will certainly always make sure that we give them a second chance, or we organize things such as people can go to confession.
Canon Wulfran Lebocq from the Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest, you are doing absolutely outstanding work here.
We try to do good things for God, for the Church and for Ireland.
Yes, and you are. And speaking as an Irish priest, may I say how much I appreciate the sacrifice you're making being here, and the importance you place on the Church in Ireland. I wish you every blessing and success, all the more so because we're depending so much on your success. God bless you, Canon.
Thank you very much. Again, God bless you all.